And then you hit pause until you're ready to start.
So
Recording. Start.
heads up. Okay, we're ready. When I see people, oh, there we go. There are some people. People are showing up.
Nice.
It's all good. Well, welcome everybody to Brainstorming the Human Connection. This is Lawrence Diggs. I'll be your host. This is brought to you by the South Dakota Humanities Council. Today we have actually, just to begin with, want to introduce you to a couple of new players. It's not their first rodeo, but it's their first ride with us. So we introduce you to our new um, executive director, Christina. Christina, would you tell everybody who you are? I know you're famous in lots of circles, but some of these circles, people they run in different rodeos, different rodeo circuits. So tell them who you are and a little bit about you.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Christina Wee. I am the executive director here at the South Dakota Humanities Council. I've been here for a little over 2 months. Prior to this, I was the CEO of a national organization promoting multiculturalism and women of color. And a few of you may know me from my role. I was the development director at Feeding South Dakota. I also served as the the executive director of the Capital Area United Way in Pierre, South Dakota. So I've been in South Dakota now for 15 years. I'm originally from Minnesota. But my big passions in life are reading all things local history, as well as just hanging out with my cat, my two daughters, and my husband. I live in Sioux Falls. I came in hot today from Sioux Falls to Brookings, but I'm glad I could be here. But with that, I do want to introduce someone special to us. You guys may notice Colby is no longer with the South Dakota Humanities Council. But we have someone amazing taking his place here, and that's Stacy Shadousho. And if I mispronounce that, I apologize. I practiced last night. But Stacy previously served with Colby in helping all things programs, but she is very well qualified to help us move forward as a council in all things programming. And so, Stacy, I'll let you maybe say anything else.
Thanks, Christina. You were close on the last name. It's Chidausha.
I'm sorry.
It's closer than most people get, so it's okay. Yeah, like Christina said, I have been with the Humanities Council. I'm starting my 4th year here. I started as an assistant to Jennifer Widman for the Festival of Books, and just kept with my passion. I absolutely love the humanities, and excited about all the things that we're working on, including tackling this new endeavor with brainstorming. I'm excited to see where we're going to go from here, and yeah, let's do this.
Yeah, good. Well, thank you both for joining us, and I hope you'll hang around, especially you, Stacy. I want you to hang around because it could go real south if you weren't here.
We're in this together, Lawrence.
Okay, great. We have Elizabeth and Jonathan, who are filmmakers. Let's say we're going to be talking about a specific film today, Without Arrows. But it's important really to set this up a little bit because sometimes we can lose sight of the importance of things by not stating maybe the obvious. And in this case, what's really important is how we communicate. How do we get information? And different kinds of data require different ways to be presented. Some things is better presented in a poem, short, sweet, memorable. Some things need music, to support it and frame it and contextualize it. Some things need books so that you can reflect and go back and say, did I read that right? You know, and for documentation, you know, some things work well if it's orally transmitted because of its immediacy. And then other things need to be written down because people have a tendency to want to do that telephone thing where they change stuff to make it sound more current, but in the process change what was actually said or done or was thought at that time. Some things are better seen in movies, so that you can take all the pieces and put them together and structure it in a way that people can absorb it and make connection. Film is one of those things that can help you to see something that if you read it or just heard it once, maybe it would work, but good chance you'd miss something. And if you can say a picture is worth 1,000 words, and films run at 25 pictures a second, plus in these days 60, you know, then there's a lot of data in the film. It's a lot of data, and we're going to be talking about the film that they're doing, but also about using film to tell stories that haven't been told before, but should be told, must be told. So welcome, Elizabeth and Jonathan. And we'll start with Elizabeth. Can you tell us something about yourself? Not the real secret stuff. You may not want to talk about that, but give us some idea of who you are, where you came from, what you
Sure.
stand
Hi,
for.
Buju. My name is Elizabeth Day. I was born in Cass Lake on the Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe in northern Minnesota. And then when I was little, like 3 years old, my family, we moved to the Twin Cities metro area where I was raised. And my dad is 7 out of 15 kids. I have a ton of aunties and uncles and cousins, and stayed really close and tight with my family. And they're amazing storytellers, my family. They just sit around and tell stories and make each other laugh. And I think I really learned the art of storytelling by just listening to my aunts and uncles entertaining each other. I was given the opportunity to go to a prep school in Massachusetts as a teenager. And the woman who I would stay with over short vacations, and when it just wasn't enough time to like fly home and then return to school, I would stay with her. Her name was Barbara Ettinger, and she is a documentary filmmaker. And that's where I learned, oh, you don't have to be from like Hollywood. You can like anyone can pick up a
Oh, no.
Uh-oh. Do we
Shoot,
lose her?
we did. Can text her. I hope
Uh-oh.
she-
Oh,
Yeah.
can you hear me? Did I?
Yeah.
Okay, now we
Yeah,
can
we got
hear
you.
Okay. So that's where I learned I could be a filmmaker, and that's a little bit about me. So I will stop there. I might turn my video off while I'm not talking just to save my juice. Miigwech.
Yeah. Okay, but what you said was juicy, so you have juice. Okay, Jonathan, you want to?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I'm coming in from Philadelphia today. I've lived in Philadelphia for over 20 years. And I grew up in Pittsburgh. And when I was always liked making art, and somehow fell into, just got a video camera at one point when I was in like high school, and was making crazy videos with my friends and skate videos. And that sort of just grew into, a film career. I started off making, just silly, crazy stuff. And then I was making like artsy experimental videos. And then after I moved to Philadelphia to go to film school at Temple University, I discovered still photography. And that led me to documentary photography, and was doing these like photo stories in Philadelphia. And then there was a project that I was working on for a little while, where we kind of thought, hey, maybe it'd be great to make like a short little documentary. I never made a documentary before, but just kind of dove in. That kind of coincided with me going back to grad school to really focus on documentary storytelling. And that's kind of where, things have gone since. And for me, there's something really exciting about a documentary story, because you don't have a script. You don't know where the story is going to go. And it's a relationship with real people before it's a movie, and I think that's an essential, piece of it. And so that's something that I hope comes through in all of my work, that this is like a deep connection with people, and we have this window of time where the movie is out in the world, but the hope is that after that, kind of initial experience of exhibiting the film happens, that we can stay friends afterwards and look back and be like, hey, we did a thing together. We had experiences that we never would have had if it wasn't for this like creative process. And hopefully we learn something about ourselves and each other, and can also maybe give back to other people in the community, along the way. So it's changed my life doing this work, and it's just been a real privilege, to somehow stumble upon it.
Yeah. So I think it's a real important thing you mentioned about how the art makes the artist, because that feeds into your next project if people can allow for their own growth while they're doing whatever it is they're doing. Let's talk about the movie itself. Tell us about it, just so we have an orientation, because we won't really talk a lot about the movie, just to give people a heads up. It's really about creation of story and why that story is important to tell. But tell us something about the movie and how you made it, so that we have a context to understand the conversation.
Sure. I think Elizabeth just bumped off again. Hopefully she can get back in, but I can start.
Okay.
So strangely, this movie that mostly takes place in South Dakota started off in Philadelphia. And I was doing a film screening series back in 2010, showing, films that were part of the PBS documentary series Independent Lens. We'd show one movie a month in community in North Philadelphia, and just would have like really great conversations. And one of the movies that came down the pipeline was called Real Engine, which is about Native American representation in media. And for that screening, I really wanted to have somebody facilitate the discussion that could really speak to that Native experience from their own lives. And a friend of mine was like, hey, there's a Native dance troupe in West Philadelphia called Native Nations Dance Theater. Why don't you reach out to them? Maybe they could come to your event. So I just cold, found their website, sent an email, and this woman named Vonda Hilton and this guy named Delwyn Fiddler Jr., who ended up being the star of Without Arrows, ended up showing up. We had a great event, a great conversation, really lively. And it was just like, hey, this is like, a real cool little moment. And then sort of afterwards, we said our goodbyes. I'm like, maybe I'll see them again, maybe not. Who knows? And a few months later, I was pushing my son around in a stroller, and I get a phone call from a number that I didn't recognize. And the guy on the other end just said, John, when are we going to make our movie? He didn't introduce himself, nothing. I'm like, wait, who are you? Did we email? Like, I'm not sure. I don't remember. But it turns out it's this guy, Delwyn Fiddler Jr., and he's a Lakota man who grew up in the Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe Reservation in South Dakota. And he wanted to bring me and a camera back home to his family to interview them about kind of their family history. And I was like, I've never been to South Dakota. I would love to go and check it out. And I sort of told him, I'm not really just an interview filmmaker. I like to just film life as it happens. You would call it maybe observational documentary. And I sort of proposed, why don't we film in Philadelphia as you're doing your dance troupe stuff? We film the trip, we do the interviews, and we make a short little film. So that's how it started with the trip in 2011. And then things kind of changed. And what ended up, we thought would be a short documentary that we'd make in a few months, ended up spanning 13 years. And we just premiered it in February in 2024. So neither of us, kind of knew what we were getting into back in 2011 when it all started. But here we are.
Yeah, it's what known as organic filmmaking.
Yeah, that's right.
To quote an old hippie term. Elizabeth, tell us how something about your input into the development of this film and how you approach filmmaking. Your mic needs to be on though for us to
Yeah, you're muted, Elizabeth.
Oh, I had a new connection, so I
Oh.
hopped So this is, now I can see you guys, which is great.
Look at that.
Yay. My, oh gosh, that's a good question. I would say my approach to this was, I I think that as I approach a story, I'm always looking for how to honor people's stories authentically, and because people are fascinating and interesting, and it's the little details that make people sparkle and shine and let their personalities shine through. So I'm always looking for like the little moments in people's lives that, you know, make it really special. And I hope that we were able to do that with the Fiddler family. They're such a special family, and you know, I'm so grateful to them for allowing Jonathan to come into their family and film them in such like an intimate way to and then from there to allow access, all of us to have access to them in that really personal way, is something that's really special. And that's something that, you know, I take very seriously, and hope that, you know, we can honor them and their family in that way and be respectful to them and their story. And because it's their life. Yeah.
Tell us about what the movie is about.
I think that the movie is about many things, but what really, for me, what the movie is about is what is home? Where is home? What does home mean to you? Does it, how do you define home? Is it a place? Is it a person? Is it a spiritual connection to land? And then are we, do we go away from home? Do we move away from home, or do we recreate home in places that we weren't necessarily born? I think it's kind of an exploration of that question. And that's something that's, I think, a really universal question that so many of us have. Even myself, being born in Cass Lake in Minnesota and being raised in the Twin Cities metro area and then moving to the East Coast, that question, I think it has always resonated with me throughout my life. And I think a lot of people ask themselves that question too.
Yes. Jonathan, you mentioned that you started out trying to just film people. You were a camera photographer, still life photographer.
Yep.
Tell us something about the transition from still to movie and how you're putting it, how you put this particular piece together.
Yeah. Yeah. So
What did that experience or approach from a still photographer's mind do to help you to tell the story that you're trying to tell?
mhm. Yeah, I think the one thing with still photography, like the single image is the essential piece of it. And so composition really matters, light matters, your angle, all of that matters for still photography. That's everything. But then when you get into film, you're talking about, is it 24 frames a second, 25, 60, it's a lot of images stacked up on top of each other. And so with that, then you have motion, and then you also have sound. So there's all of these other ingredients. And one thing that I was doing when I started my first documentary, because that project started off as a still photo project, I had both my still camera and I had my video camera, and I would go back and forth. Sometimes I'd be like, shoot some video, and then I would put the video camera down and shoot stills. And it's always nice to have the still photos. And I was shooting 35 millimeter film. So there's just something really beautiful about that. But then when it would come to editing, it was like, where's the middle of the scene? What were you doing? Why'd you, because like with a film, a movie, it's like every scene is there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And there's times where it was like, there's chunks of material that are missing because I had the camera down and I was shooting stills. So
Yeah.
eventually I realized, like, okay, you can't do both interchangeably. And another thing that I sort of learned is that I was very precious with composition in the still image and just trying to find, the perfect light, the perfect angle. But I noticed when I was shooting motion, when I was shooting cinema, that I kept like adjusting things, and it was like distracting. There's like the good enough framing, because it's like, it's not about the exquisite framing, it's about what the person is doing and how they're speaking and how they're moving. And that me like constantly readjusting, trying to get that perfect angle, was like then distracting because there's these random camera moves. And so I just learned to be like, frame your thing up and just hold the shot. Stop trying to like tweak it. And because there's a lot of magic in the editing of putting one shot against another. So those were all things that I learned trial and error. My previous film, which was called Quest, I shot for 3 years. I shot for 10 years for that project, but the first 3 years were so many experiments. So this feature-length film, 3 years of filming, ended up being the first 5 minutes of the movie, and we like got rid of everything else because there were so many mistakes. But the other thing too, with like longitudinal, long-term storytelling, is that there's a relationship that develops over time. And so the intimacy and trust that was there in year 1 and year 2, even, that's still a lot of time, 2 years, was totally different than what you're getting to in year 6 and year 7. And there's just an intimacy, a vibrance to the material as you kind of go on. And so, so those are all things about like kind of my early process of moving from stills to cinema. But I got to say, in my heart too, is like, there's something about stills that's a little more immediate that I'm like, you just get a couple days. I could shoot for a week and get a narrative arc of beautiful pictures and be done with the project. Whereas film, you're just kind of waiting and being patient. When's the next thing going to happen? And it takes a little bit out of you 13 years in.
Yeah. For what it's worth, I
Totally.
have done this journey and I still prefer stills.
Mhm.
But that's a shop talk. I want to talk about the intimacy of your relationship with the subject, and what do they want to say? What is it? We can talk about it's about home. We did that. But what are they trying to say in this film as you develop this relationship? What are some of the stories that they have that they want to tell the world?
Mhm. I think it's great. I think another piece of home is, it's not a building. Sometimes it is sometimes it's a place, but it's about people. And I think our film, you have, multiple generations, connecting. So it's about, our main guy, Delwyn Fiddler Jr., returning from, leaving a life that he built in Philadelphia to return home and to connect to his parents. And so we have like the parents' generation, the children, but then, Delwyn has his nieces and nephews, and then later on his own kid. And so you're talking about multiple generations, the grandparents, the parents, and then then the grandkids or the kids. But then the other piece is that there's the generations that came before, the ancestors, that are also very important. And like every link in that chain has a critical impact on what comes next. And sort of, you're looking at the connections moving backwards in time, but also forward in time with like the young kids who are going to grow up and carry on those legacies. And I think the essential piece of what Delwyn and his mom Shirley wanted to convey is like to honor and celebrate their legacy of their family tradition and their grandfather, this guy Elkhead, red hair, who's a very significant, person in, Lakota history, and wanting to honor that, but then honor all of the, kind of the links that, came in between. And I think that's something that they wanted to share and celebrate. And Delwyn's very proud of his family and his tradition, and wanted to share that. I think that was a
Well,
huge driving thing.
I want to get back to the importance of the telling stories that have been so traumatic that people have buried them, but they are sort of like sticking under the rug trying to pop out.
Mm.
But I want to stop here and give our esteemed panel a chance to also ask questions, weigh in, because all of us will always be smarter than any one of us. So, uh, anybody have questions or something before we dive deeper into this filmmaking process? Tara?
Did this kickstart you wanting to explore any more family stories? I know you're talking about the Fiddler family. So from your visitation then here to South Dakota, did that, you were talking about relationships as well. Did that open up additional ones of telling more of the people's stories here?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And through just spending so much time, you meet so many amazing people that I got to know over the course of years. And then they made like be in the background of a shot or something because we were so kind of focused in on this like central storyline. So there are, especially with the extended family, there's other stories that sort of unfolded and continue to unfold that, there's potential to continue following. Right now, Elizabeth, you could actually speak to what you're up to now. It's very exciting. But for me, I'm trying to kind of close up all the loose ends. We want to do a community engagement screening campaign and like bring the film back to community in South Dakota. So we're working on all that. So that's kind of my focus right now, as opposed to what's next. But there's definitely a lot of things out there, and it's just a question of do we pursue it. But Elizabeth, you should talk about what you have going on and what you're pursuing in terms of stories.
Yeah, I do think that's an amazing question, though. And just to go back a little bit to answer that, I think that, John filmed for so long. I came on the project in 2019, so I haven't been with the Fiddlers. I haven't been embedded like how John was. But I got to watch all this amazing footage, and I really feel like I know them so well. And like, I remember the first time I met Dylan in person, I'm like, I know everything about you, and you have no idea who I am. It's kind of a bizarre process in that, but yeah, we could have made 3 to 5 different stories with the footage that John had, but we just decided to go on this track. But yeah, there's a lot of people who John was able to engage with that, would be really interesting to continue to film and see how their journey goes. But yeah, so my next project, it's not a documentary. It is a Native rom-com. It's called Native Love Jam. It's a novel. I highly recommend you get it if you want a light-hearted, funny, little bit steamy Native rom-com book to read. It's an easy read. It goes really quick. My friend Tashia Hart wrote it. I'm actually visiting with her in Duluth this week, which is where I am in the hotel room. And yeah, people are interested in it. So hopefully in a year from now, we'll be in production with Native Love Jams. It's about, thanks for the link. Yeah, it's 2 chefs go foraging and fall in love in a berry patch. So that's my next gig.
Well, did anyone else have something that they want to ask or?
Lawrence, Karen asked in the chat, did you submit this to any film festivals in South Dakota?
I don't think so.
So there's a festival and I don't think it's not Sioux Falls. What's the other falls that's over that way just
Aberdeen?
Across there's not a ton that we were able to find. If you got, honestly, in the chat, if you guys have recommendations of places, because this is honestly how this stuff works, is word of mouth. So if you guys have recommendations, let us know.
I would recommend Film Freeway.
Yeah,
They have the ones that are relevant, here. because people who are not registered on there, they're probably not a thing.
Mhm.
So I would go with Film Freeway, but we do have the South Dakota Film Festival. And, they're in Aberdeen. That's where they stuff. But there's East River, West River, and now I understand like Vermilion's going to pop up again. So
Hmm.
yeah. Any Sharon?
Um, I'm not, this isn't really a question about the process of making the documentary, but I'm thinking about the difference between fiction and the documentary as you're describing it. How a book of fiction can take the three generations and you can really, maybe by the end of the book, you have an idea of what home is. I really like that idea of home. And where is home and what is a home? And so, uh, yeah, in fiction, I don't write fiction, but it seems to me you can go between the generations, or you can do something in one generation and it pops out in the current generation, and there's a tie there that's surprising. So can you, I don't know anything about making films. So can you do that in your documentary, in a film?
Um, I think to a point, yes. And it's that's a really a good discussion to have around documentary and ethics of documentary. And is it is there really such thing as truth in documentary, and what is like cinema verite, like the truth of cinema, and what is manipulated by the filmmaker. And John, what was the name of the filmmaker that you saw? It was like the master class thing at the Yihalava Film Festival.
Oh, it was a Hungarian filmmaker, fiction filmmaker.
Yeah.
I'd have to do a little searching, but it's this very famous Hungarian, fiction filmmaker, makes these very artistic, films. But yeah.
Yeah, and to his point, he was saying the instant you pick up a camera, there is no more truth in documentary, because all of a sudden what we see is the cameraman's perspective, right? It's no longer this huge great big world and everything happening around the subject, but it's like what's happening in the eye of the camera. So yes, there are some things that you can do as a documentary filmmaker to highlight, accentuate like those like different points that you would really like the audience to hone. But then also like what's the influence of the filmmaker, and when does it stop becoming cinema verite and start just becoming like some kind of manipulation of the filmmaker. And that's a big challenge. And a lot of like ethical discussions happen, and we were really lucky to have this amazing team between myself and Jonathan and our two editors, Olivia's our music person, Ellen and Leia. We were able to have these really important group discussions around, are we being ethical? Are we being manipulative? Is this truthful? Or is it just too boring to do this? So we still have to, provide something that's enjoyable to watch and keeps people engaged too. So I think that's always a big challenge for documentary filmmakers, which is kind of why I'm a little bit excited to do a scripted narrative for the next one, because you know what's going to happen and you're in control of like the storyline, versus if you're filming someone's life, you don't have control of what they do. You're just there to observe.
Yeah. And with
Lanico Lee.
okay.
Oh,
I'm
Lanico,
sorry.
were you going to try to? Did you have something? She had her hand up. Maybe We can't hear
Oh,
you.
I'm
You're coming
sorry.
in now. There you
Okay.
go.
I apologize that my mic was muted. I think this is a fascinating subject because it reminded me of my experience teaching Frederick Manford's book, Lord Grizzly. And this was to the middle, well, for the lack of a better word, I guess you'd call it junior high, well, 6 to 12-year-olds. And we went on to the landscape where all this was taking place. This is a story of Hugh Glass. And my students were actually reading students, so they were honing their reading drama skills as they were also perfecting their pronunciation and all this other good stuff. So what was interesting about that particular book was how it was portrayed in the film Revenant and how far removed from the text. Even the locale was so dramatically different that I was repulsed to even see it. In fact, I have not even seen Revenant because of that. Because my students we went up the Grand River, we went to Dog Butte. This landscape is so vastly different than what it is up in Banff or Calgary where they filmed all that. So when we're talking about telling truthful stories, when we have a distance between the person who experienced it, the one who's telling it, and the one who's showing it in a motion picture setting of sorts, there's just so much that comes into play regarding the creative element, the way in which the story is translated from a novel. It was looked upon as a novel, but it was based on a true event. And then we have Hollywood's depiction of it, which was so vastly different in the way in which it was treated. You have small points that one of our presenters mentioned. The details are able to be expanded on depending on how you see the camera working to your creative edge. Anyway, I just wanted to make that point that I find that what our lady said here, was it Elizabeth, indicated the ethics of it all, the way in which we tell the story. We are storytelling beings, and the way in which we examine our moral compass to being truthful, it kind of goes out the window when we have somebody who's able to craft something from someone else's life in a way that is radically different from the way another person will take it. So I had that point to share. I also wanted to ask a question. I took my undergraduate degree in Philadelphia, actually a suburban college, and I am Native American, and there was a huge community of Native American people. My aunt happened to be quartermaster person in the naval yards there in Philadelphia. So we spent a great deal of time traveling to powwows up and down the proximity of Washington, Philadelphia, and that area, and Virginia. And we got to know a whole community, and all of these individuals were from different tribes. And there was such a sense of home in that setting for us because we were all displaced from our own birthplaces and in a metropolitan area, but the lives that I was so fascinated by were the iron workers. They were very much a part of our Native American community. So I just thought I'd share that. I was wondering if anybody had ever done any documentary on the life of relocated Native people, for whatever purpose they gather, they create these homes away from home. I've not seen your film yet, and I find that very interesting to be able to look at what you were able to discover there. The Fiddler family is from my reservation.
Hmm.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. The comments, I really appreciate it. I think everything you said was so beautiful. You should check out a documentary made by Regan Tarbell. It's called Little Ganawage. And it's about the steel workers who would come from Canada and live in New York City. And they had their own little block that they would all live in. And it does tell the story of the tragedy of their community, that there was a bridge collapsed and they lost, I think, 23 or 20, it was over 20 men from their community, and it was devastating to their community. So then they did come up with a way to send their men to work in New York without everyone leaving at the same time. But it's called Little Kanawage, and the filmmaker is Regan Tarbell. So I would recommend that movie for sure.
So I want to go back to the ability of film to allow people to tell stories that weren't told before. Because if you watch enough movies, one of the things that at least occurs to me is I know people whose personal story is a lot more exciting or more interesting than many of the things that make it to full motion picture. And I will say, almost as an aside, the you know, the moment you try to recreate reality, you will fail. So it doesn't matter which media and how you approach it, unless you actually recreate that reality, it's not the same thing. So there's always some editing that's involved. Even if you pick up a paintbrush or scratch it with a stick, a charged stick on a cave, there's going to be it's not recreating reality. It's kind of creating a new reality that somehow purports to be honest, reporting. But I have not found anything that actually brings in the reality. I mean, and that's a whole philosophical thing that we could go on. But I would like to talk about the ability of the filmmaker to talk about suppressed trauma or give people an opportunity to express not only trauma but their happiness, the things that make them human and can connect us with those people. What tools do you bring as filmmakers to help us do that as humans?
Thanks for that question. I think that's something that we really kind of used as the spine of our work, talking or not talking about trauma. And we really made this film intended for a Native audience, first and foremost. And the way that we did that is that, we have 86 minutes to tell a story that was filmed over 13 years. And by not taking any one of those precious 80 minutes to give a history lesson about the Native experience historically, if people want to learn more and like, why are they behaving like this, or why did that happen, then that's on them to go do the research and do the legwork themselves. And people are very capable of doing that. There's Google at the tip of your fingertips. But we really, first and foremost, wanted to not take any of our precious minutes to give a history lesson. I think so. That's first and foremost. And then not late, just understanding that there is a history of trauma, but not focusing in on the trauma rather than the resilience of our people, the resilience of Native families, the laughter and the joy and the music and the culture we want to highlight first and foremost is like all the assets of the culture. And that's the way that, you know, we carry on. I don't know, John, if you want to add to that at all.
Yeah, no, I think that's all, yeah, all really good. And, you know, these are just really important. We're very intentional with all of our decisions. In some ways, getting the footage is kind of like just stuff happens and you're reacting and trying to keep an open mind. But then when you are structuring the footage and editing, like we want to be very careful and conscientious and thoughtful about every shot, every soundbite, everything that we're putting in there. Are we honoring the family, and are we, you know, seeking to keep them safe, emotionally safe, while also telling a powerful story? And that's a, you know, that could be a tricky balance sometimes. And I think as a filmmaker, sometimes you bring a camera and you ask questions of somebody, or you're just, and there's stories that come out and it's like, oh wait, I'm not equipped to be a therapist, I'm a storyteller. And it's like, often it was just me. And it's like we're doing this process where I have this machine that can share this with millions of people, you know, but how it feels in the room is, oh, there's just John, my friend, I've known him for 5 years. I'm telling this story. And that's where you get the intimacy and the beauty, but then also the responsibility of to be careful about how we're using this. And like, you know, what is it that we owe our protagonists, the people we're filming, but what do we owe our audience as well? What do we owe the larger, you know, Cheyenne River Sioux tribe community, you know, who didn't, you know, agree to be filmed, but it's like, this is that part of their community, you know? So there's a lot of things that we're balancing. And so, yeah, so the question of like trauma and joy, I think Elizabeth got it. It's like, we're trying to show the balance of both. And we're not getting into the historical lessons, but you do get moments from the family that are traumatic, things that they've endured. But I think it helps us to understand them better and creates an opportunity for people to connect in a deep way who've gone through something similar. We had a screening in Duluth, actually, where a young man during the Q&A raised his hands like, hey, I've gone through something very similar, and asked a question to Delwyn's, how do you move on? How did you get back into wearing your regalia and going back to powwow? Because I've put my regalia away after going through what I've gone through. And there's this opportunity for a connection that was facilitated by the fact that we told the story. And that's, I think, the point. It empowered Delwyn to be like, yeah, I went through something that was really hard, and now I can share what I've learned, or even just be like, I'm with you. I've been there. It is hard. Here's what I've done. And then also create an opportunity for this young man to be like, you're not alone. And so I think that's the beauty of the whole thing. But it's a very delicate balance.
There's an axiom in filmmaking that there's always more film on the floor than on the screen. And all of that film on the floor is also part of the story. It might be underexposed, but it's still part of the story that when you go back to expose it correctly, that's a different story now, because people typically will tell a different thing or tell it in a different way. That said, how can movies, in particular your movie, help us to talk to each other? You know, what could it or does it bring to us so that we can actually go on to share more of ourselves with each other?
I could start. I think, Elizabeth, you probably have some great things to add too, but watching a movie, especially in a room together, we create a shared experience. And so whether that's a room full of all Native folks, all folks from Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe Reservation, or a mix of Native and non-Native, or a room full of non-Native folks, but these people have a shared experience, and then they can talk to each other about what it brings up. And I think there's something really beautiful about that, an opportunity, and think about how do we facilitate our Q&As? How do we facilitate kind of our post-screening engagement. But I think there's something really special that can happen there by giving people a shared experience that's hopefully emotional and compelling. Yeah, and then what comes out of that, it really depends on what people are bringing to the table. And so yeah, and so every screening is totally different because it's a different mix of people.
Elizabeth, you had something to add?
Yeah, I think yeah, that yes, the shared experience. And then I think a representation in the media is really, really vital and important to um, everyone having a better understanding of the Native experience and um, demystifying things and just an accurate representation. So it just helps debunk um, stereotypes and humanize people and making it easier to approach a conversation. Maybe will make it easier for someone to ask a question about Native experience or a deeper understanding. Yeah, hopefully it just it's an elixir. It smooths the way.
Tara had an interesting comment. Maybe our executive director might uh, put a check mark on. She said, I see a one film South Dakota. We have a one book South Dakota now in our future for viewing and opening up those discussions. And that really sounds interesting, intriguing. You know, like I know when we do the one book South Dakota, at least when I entertain or share that with people, I try to focus on like, okay, what are you learning from the book? Everybody can read and get a different take on the book, but then what are you learning about ourselves? What and yourself that we can share? And I can see a potential here for a movie such as this to open up some conversation about uh, various aspects that make us human and parts that maybe I experienced but you didn't, and you experienced but I didn't. We have at least a couple of librarians here, and that seems like you know uh, a place to start, especially when we're looking for places to to screen movies. I would say that libraries are very underrated and underrepresented. Tara, what would you say about? I know Tara, she likes libraries. What would you say about
Well, I am the director of the library here in Gregory, South Dakota, and I did live on the Cheyenne River reservation for a time. So my child was actually born there when we were living there. But I do, yes, I have a large 82-inch screen for such this event. We'll be looking at doing that for our missing and murdered Indigenous persons to have a filming, for our series that we're hosting, and then having those discussions, showing the film and discussing it. And just, I think a book gives us one option, for inputting things, and that the film can give you such a, having that visualization, that in your face moment, and then discussing it and just seeing the reactions around the room, how powerful that can be. But then also opening it up for that discussion and talking about it afterwards, after everybody's watched the same thing, and seeing how it impacted us emotionally or personally afterwards. So yeah, I am open to it and always looking for something in the library. And if this would be an opportunity for a screening of this and having those discussions and bringing people together, that's why we're all here and on this Zoom call for sure. So
that? Yes, I agree with you, Tara. That to me is the whole point of uh, this series is bringing people together to toss around ideas and mutually share things with each other. And this seems like an excellent opportunity to open a discussion. We don't have to see it as, well, let's just talk about this film. Okay, it's going to be a catalyst for discussions that maybe the film has nothing to do with, that getting us together to like, well, I felt this, or I experienced this thing, or I wish I had experienced that, but since I didn't, I had this idea, or I looked at life this way. That to me seemed quite interesting. Um, yeah, Jonathan's saying, let's do it,
Do it.
So,
That's how it
yeah,
happens.
so that's right. We made a connection. That's a good thing. That's worth it. Stacy, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I see on the SDPB website that the film is scheduled to premiere on January 13th of 2025. Where can people actually check this out? Because now we're all pretty excited about it.
Yeah, so it'll be on, PBS on Independent Lens on January 13th. And probably with that, it'll be on the PBS website for a period of time to watch, for free. And then up until that time, we're looking to do some robust community engagement stuff. And so some of the South Dakota things were sort of leaning on Delwyn's connections. He actually spent a number of years at St. Joseph's Indian School. And so thinking about maybe doing a screening there that would also be open to the larger community. So it's really just trying to kind of figure things out. Delwyn and I are both in Pennsylvania. Right now, Elizabeth's in, Minnesota. But so it's a little bit of travel to make it happen for us to be there in person. But yeah, we're looking to make we'd love for people to watch it any way they can. Watch it on your computer, watch it on TV. But if we can get a group of people in a room and have a discussion afterwards, like that's what I get the most excited about. So yeah, reach out to us. And again, we can look more into those, sort of South Dakota film festivals, and maybe there's a connection there. But programmers do what they want to do, so we can submit it, but no guarantees they'll program us. But yeah, we can try, but just grassroots, word of mouth, that's a great way to make it happen.
Excellent. So we only have about 3 minutes or so. Anything that you guys want to talk about that we didn't cover? Because I owe you that.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've covered a lot. I am really grateful for this conversation. I appreciate everyone being here. It just really fills my heart so full, having these kinds of discussions, and thanks for taking the time out of your day to chat with us. And yeah, I hope that we can make some connections to get it to your community.
Jonathan, anything you want to add to this?
Yeah, I think I just put a link to our website. You can watch the trailer there, and maybe that leads to things. But yeah, I don't know. I guess just to say that this film wouldn't exist without the Fiddlers, without Delwyn Fiddler Jr. having a vision and wanting to share his story and sticking with it for all this time, and like the vulnerability there. Yeah, just if you watch a documentary, just know that the people on screen, they're sacrificing a lot and being very vulnerable in order to tell the story. And sure, the people behind the camera are as well. But there is just something very special about documentaries because these are real people's lives, and it's an honor to do it. And again, you don't have a script, so you're just on this journey, on this sort of runaway train. You don't know where it's going to go, and it's sometimes it's hard to track that. But that's where the greatest pieces of the story often come out, is like the things that you never expect would happen. So just to
I
share
should
that.
I should say it's worth mentioning that this is how they make reality TV. It's they have people sitting around in a room and just acting stuff, and they're filming it all the time, and they say, "Ooh, that was a good take." That together.
Yeah.
But it's a whole different. If a whole, but I think in making a documentary, I don't know if there's a better way than just have the camera running, or having it in place, uh, because that's where I think still photography has an edge over movies, is that you can like snap shots of people doing things, and especially when they can forget the camera, you have more opportunities for people to forget the camera and
Mhm.
just relax into being themselves. At least whenever I try to film people, I've gone to using really small cameras now because I find that, oh, if they can forget the camera, you can get the expression in the face. You can, that body language comes through. Whereas if you got a film or a big honking camera, they can't forget it. And so
Mhm.
they're trying to put on their suit and make sure they look pretty, but that's not them.
Sure. And I think for me, you spend 13 years, people get what the suit's on again, suit's on again. Eventually, like I'm tired of putting the suit. I gotta just be myself. I can't, I'm aware of it, but I gotta live my life. Yeah.
Right. Well, Stacy's giving us the high sign. We're over time. Uh, thanks again for being with us. We hope you'll join us next week. Same time, same station. Thanks a lot.